All right, well, welcome to our webinar with Fickewirth Benefits Advisors on how to keep your top performers and hire more just like them. We are glad that you have joined us this morning. We are going to be covering this very, very important topic. It is a bunch of folks who are just curious about how to get the right people on the bus and then how, more importantly, to keep them there. So we're going to do everything we can to get you equipped for this very important topic, but of course you need to be able to see and hear us. So you should be able to see our screen on Webinar Logistics and hear my voice. My name is Matt. I'm one of the consultants here, and so I'm going to be moderating today's webinar. So we're going to go over a few things that are very important to this topic. First of all, talking about what the problem is and what is causing it. There's a lot of things that are just part of our society, part of our current climate, our economy that are causing these issues, and we're going to then talk about how to build an effective attraction and retention strategy in order to combat some of these difficulties that we're seeing people losing their top performers left and right. And then we're going to go even further and talk about some future trends, some things that on the ground we see happening in certain industries and things that you can look forward to and help you predict what's coming. So we would love you to interact with this webinar as we go about this morning. You see a questions box on the right hand of your screen at any time. Please feel free to interact by asking us a question. Those questions will come directly to me, and at the end of our webinar I will be giving our presenter Jennifer a few of those questions back. If we don't have an opportunity to take those questions live, then we will be sure to contact you personally and give you a completely informed answer. So a little bit about our presenter is Jennifer Linscomb. She's our lead consultant here at Fickewirth Benefits Advisors. She is the big brains behind all this operation, so she's the right person to be discussing all these things with us today. She has a lot of experience in the industry and has been researching this for quite some time and found a lot of useful information that she's going to share with us today. So let's go ahead and hand it over to Jennifer.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Matt. My name's Jennifer Linscomb, as Matt said. I'm going to talk today a little bit about attraction and retention and kind of what's the issue, what's going on, what are we seeing in the industry, why is it happening, and then how do we actually strategize to make sure that we can actually attract and retain the talent that we want. As we know, this is a huge thing for companies. We see that people are trying to get creative and do all kinds of new things. We have a very interesting time right now because of the workforce that we have, because of the economic climate that we have. Healthcare reform is coming into play. So there's a lot of variables that make it just kind of a fun time to be talking about this. So with that, I'm going to dive into what is the problem. Why are we even talking about attraction and retention, and why is it something we should focus on? Well, the number one reason that we need to talk about this is that companies are having costly, unwanted turnover. So we know that the 2011 national average of turnover was about 15.2%. Now, that's high, but it also includes the natural attrition that companies have. It includes some planned turnover, meaning that there were companies that actually had to let go of a section of their employees due to the economic downturn, but it also includes some of that unwanted turnover that we have. And the unwanted turnover is where you have your key talent, the good employees that you've been trying to keep, that you've invested time and money into, and for one reason or the other are leaving to move on to bigger and better pastures. So turnover, as we know, is very expensive. The cost of unwanted turnover in a position can be between 50 and 150% of the total cost of the position. Now, that's a lot of money. These costs come into play when you're talking about lost productivity. So because now this person is no longer there, the position is available, meaning that that work needs to be done by somebody else who now, and all these companies that are already lean have now more employees that have to take on more work, and it may not be their area of expertise. So you see that the productivity is kind of lost in that sense. You have to worry about cross-training. You have to worry about severance packages possibility. You may have to worry about hiring somebody with a sign-on bonus. You have to worry about recruiting process, recruiting costs, background checks, drug tests, interviewing, all the time, all the money, all of the investment inside of that. So as we know, turnover is expensive, and at all costs we want to avoid that unwanted turnover. Obviously there's the natural attrition that just happens, and that's part of doing business. And in the same token, there's that kind of turnover that you may have to have because of where your company is at. But what I really want to focus on is that unwanted turnover. And we know that the most unwanted turnover, let's just focus on that really quickly, the most unwanted turnover is the first 6 months. We know that in the first 3 months on average that you are actually investing in your employee, meaning that that is the time that it takes for them to ramp up before they can actually add value. The second 3 months, we see that they're actually contributing to the value of the company, meaning that now there's a break-even point at about 6.5 months. That obviously depends on the industry you're in, and it depends on the type of employee you have and the years of service and that type of thing. But on average, I think this is a good number to remember, that you do not want turnover in the first 6 months, because if you do have that turnover, you know that that turnover is just lost money. There is no return on investment in those employees, and in fact, it's actually just an investment and no return. So we want to avoid this turnover, and in addition, any other turnover that is caused by something that the company could have avoided. Okay? So let's talk about what is causing this unwanted turnover, and how are we going to focus on that. So the big reason that we're seeing this turnover come to be is because of a mutual lack of loyalty. So we see between the employer and employees a huge disconnect, because employers, for one reason or the other, have had to make tough business decisions, and many of those have been at the expense of the employees. So we've seen, and I'll talk more about this later, the cuts of jobs have been cut, benefits have been cut, and that type of thing. And because of that, employees view that the employer is no longer loyal to them, does not care about them as much as they used to. In addition to that, because employers have been strained and the companies have been lean, this means that the employers have had no time to focus on employee retention and job satisfaction, meaning that that's no longer something that they're prioritizing. Their number one priority right now is to make sure that the business stays afloat and that they make money and that they're profitable. And that makes sense. Employers need to be focusing on, they need to be focusing on how to make money so that they can even offer any jobs. But it's coming back time now to focus on that employee retention and job satisfaction, because employees have been sticking around with their employers because of the recession. A lot of employees have stayed with their employers out of fear of not being able to find another job. But what we see now from the newest MetLife study on employee benefits is that 60% of your top performers are actively looking for another job, which is not a good number. That's a very, very high number. And in fact, 33% of all employees are actually looking for another job in the next 12 months. So the fact that that's actually happening means that employers, it's time for you to start shifting and looking at this as a strategy for the business. That yes, profitability needs to be high. Yes, business needs to be running well. But part of that is that if you're spending money on turnover, then the business is not running well. And that is a business exposure to think about. So I think it's the time and the right place for employers to start shifting back to showing that they care about their employees, showing that they are loyal, and in return, ideally, the employees would show that they're loyal back to the employers. We'll talk a little bit about how the generational changes as well play a role into this, because as we know, we have a large group of employees that are just graduating from college or maybe been in the workforce a little while, and their sense of loyalty towards their employer is going to be a little bit different than what you see in the baby boomer generation. So I'll talk about that in more depth later down the road. So as I said, what's causing this lack of loyalty between the employer and the employee is caused by, first, the economic downturn, which we can go into great length about. But one thing I think that's missed often is that everybody's looking for something different. So you have a very, very dynamic and robust workforce now that includes somebody from all different walks of life. So you have 18-year-olds, you have 65-year-olds, and they're all working together. They all want something different. They all need something different from their employer. And if you as the employer have not been able to adapt your policy to incorporate all those needs, then you're missing the boat. And you may be losing this key talent because you've not been ready to adapt your policies to make sure that you're making everybody happy. You may be doing a great job in making sure that this one group of people is happy, but it may not be broad enough to incorporate the entire workforce that you have. So we'll go into detail on both of these. Economic downturn, obviously there were lots of layoffs. So because of the layoffs, it looks to the employees like there's no regard for loyalty. So essentially that you've had employees that have worked at companies for 15, 20 years and they got laid off just as easily as somebody who'd been there for 6 months. So in the view of the employees, they see, well, now there's these layoffs and you have no loyalty to me, so why should I have any loyalty to you? Cutbacks, obviously, those were huge. Benefits, training, promotions, bonuses, salary increases, all of the kind of perk things that really have drawn employees to different groups. Those cutbacks make a really big impact, and maybe more so than employers usually think. So I think that's something to really think about as well. Obviously, the economic downturn has caused low employee morale, not only because they're afraid of losing their job, but because maybe their spouses have lost their jobs. Maybe they're in foreclosure. Maybe their children have lost their jobs. Maybe, you know, who knows, they're going bankrupt. Maybe somebody got really sick. Maybe their parents are going bankrupt. It's all these different things that are causing a lot of stress. And because of all of that, employees are just a little bit more suspicious of their employers and don't trust that they're going to be there and back them in time of need. And that is nothing to be said bad about the employer. The employer is doing what needs to be done to make sure that the business is successful. But there's different ways of making the impression, at least, that you're loyal to your employees that will create a better return on investment in terms of your employees. So I said everyone's looking for something different. And so what I mean by this is that it just makes it very challenging to create a company strategy because you have a very, very different group of employees working all together. So you have different generations, as I talked about. You have baby boomers, Generation X, you have Generation Y, all working together. You have diverse employee needs, meaning that if you're in Southern California, they need something different than people in Northern California. They need something different than people in Idaho. It's very different what people need, and it's also different based on your industry. If you're talking about what people at Google need, it's a little bit different than what people at the Hilton need. So you're talking about how these strategies are just difficult to, or challenging, I guess is the word, to develop because you need to keep so many different components in mind. So it's a difficulty, it's a difficult thing to do, but not impossible. So let's talk about how do we avoid the unwanted turnover, because that's really the big question. So the first step is to make sure that you attract and hire the right talent. So this means you have to develop a strategic recruiting process, because we know that 80% of employee turnover is due to bad hiring decisions. And as we talked about earlier, that first 6 months is the big number, because that first 6 months dictates whether or not you're going to lose money or not make money, but get a return on investment from your employee. So some examples of a recruiting process may include developing an employee referral program with rewards. So this is the idea that you see if you refer an employee that's a spouse, a family member, a friend, something along those lines, then they come and they stay for more than 6 months, that after 6 months, the employee who referred them would get some sort of reward, some sort of stipend for referring them. Another example may include personality profiling with an IQ test or a skill set test, which I think is a great idea because this has been a successful thing I've seen where it isolates down the need that you have at the company as well as the culture that you have. So you first have to step back and say, well, what are we actually looking for, and what kind of culture do we actually want, and what kind of person are we looking to fill this actual position. It takes a little bit more time and thought to think about that, but in doing so, then you know exactly what you're looking for, and by having these profile tests, you then can isolate whether or not that person is a true candidate or not. Because as we all know, looking through 500 resumes, they can all look beautiful. But at the end of the day, what really matters is that personality going to fit with our culture? So this helps with a little bit of that. Resume screening qualification, we've seen a lot of systems that are unable to do this. So ADP has something along those lines where you can essentially enter in your filtering process and saying, I want anybody with keywords of finance or with law firm or something along those lines. And it will isolate your resumes down to people only with those keywords. Now, keep in mind, I look at that. If you're hiring a large portion of people, this is a great way. If you're going through thousands of resumes, then I think it's a good thing. If you're going through maybe 100 or maybe less than 100, I think that you may miss some people because some some people aren't so great at writing resumes. So you may miss somebody who didn't use a keyword. Not everybody is trained in SEOs in terms of keywords for their resumes. A big piece too, I think I've seen success in having good interview questions and process. So a lot of times there's no real standard process or questions that people are asking or going through. So you may have a system where they come in and the interview questions don't have anything to do with, you know, the culture of the company or with the type of person this person is, where I've seen that success, and they say that one interview portion is going to be about the personality, one interview is going to be about the skill set, one is going to be about do they actually fit in our culture. And I think that that works out really, really well. And you may have different people within your organization that are better at getting those questions answered. So I think that having that process and interview questions kind of nailed down so that you actually are getting to the heart of the matter is going to make you successful and also eliminate the interviews that don't go so well. The last thing is talking about online recruiting versus outsourced recruiting, and it really depends on the position that you're looking for. I think I've seen success in both of these. You know, if you're looking for a highly qualified CFO, you may not place an ad on Craigslist. You're probably going to hire an outsourced recruiter to go and headhunt a CFO that's currently working. But certain positions, I've seen great success with Craigslist, and it depends also on the age of the person that you're looking for, and also the skill set and the number of years of service and kind of where they're located. Because if you're looking in Idaho, I think Craigslist isn't going to be the best thing in the world. In California in general, Craigslist is a huge thing. So we see that it's a very strong tool to be using, and it's free. So that's a good thing. So now you have attracted and hired the right people. So the next step is to make sure that you actually keep that talent, because now you've invested the money to get them here. Now you have them in the door. Now how do you actually keep the talent that you've acquired? So going through this, obviously, one of the big things, just to take a step back on this, is to make sure that when you're looking at all of these, that it depends on your company and it depends on the culture of your company. And really just kind of understanding the direction that you want to go as a company is the biggest thing here. Because this is just from Career Builder, the top 10 desired retention strategies, but it may not be the retention strategy that fits within the company that you have built over the past 40 years. I see a lot of companies that are family-run, and the culture that they have is a family-run business. And so talking about increasing salaries may not be the #1 thing for your employees. So we'll get into that because you really need to understand what specifically is your culture and your employees. But just going through this, obviously increasing salaries, #1. I could have guessed that, you could have guessed that. Everybody wants more money. But obviously that costs more money. So as an employer, let's think about some other things that you may be able to do. So improving employee benefits. You may think that this could cost money, which it could if you did it one way, which is obviously just generally increasing your benefits. But here in 2013, in the wake of healthcare reform, that's the opposite of what we're seeing. We're not seeing people improving benefits. We're seeing people try to maintain any type of benefit plan. And what employees actually are asking about here is two things. One, explain my benefits better to me so that I can actually understand them. If employees understand their benefits, they will feel like they've been improved because they actually understand how to use them. One of the #1 things I see is that these employers offer these beautiful benefit packages, and the employees have no idea that they even offer them, or that they're even available, or even how to use them. So the first thing is to make sure that when you are offering a benefit package, that you are promoting it and making sure that it's communicated effectively and that they're getting the best use out of what you're currently offering. But in addition to that, we're seeing a huge rise in voluntary plans, because the voluntary plans are plans that employees can enroll in. And the idea behind that is just making that as easy as possible. I've seen employers offer a slew of benefits now, including pet insurance, car insurance, homeowners insurance. They offer critical illness insurance, cancer insurance, and all those things are at no cost to the employer except for the ease of making it payroll deduction if possible. And by doing that, you're creating an ease for your employees so they don't have to go out and search for these things. But it also looks like you're improving employee benefits. So I think that there's some opportunity there to do things without costing a lot of money. Providing flexible work schedules. So this has been a huge, huge, huge thing in the past couple years. And what we've heard in the news most recently is about Yahoo. And Yahoo decided to, a few years back, provide flexible work schedules for their employees, and recently they decided to dismantle that program. I will just have a disclaimer of my personal opinion that I think that the process that they had to implement a flexible work schedule was not as effective as it should have been, considering the workforce that they have. And in addition, Yahoo's just not doing as well as a company in general. So I think this was also a way of saying this is how we're going to cut costs and having a little bit of a scapegoat. So just my personal opinion, but I think flexible work schedules can be wonderful, beautiful things. People now are commuting so much, and people are spending a lot less time with their families. So employers being flexible with that and allowing employees to have kind of a little bit more freedom is really, really valued. And this, again, doesn't have to cost the company money if you do it effectively. The fourth one is another one that you can do without costing any money, which is increasing employee recognition. So this can be something along the lines of just sending out an email and saying, congratulations, you know, Jim did a really great job on this program, and we're really happy for him. I have met with an employer who they had a picture frame in the lobby where every single month what they did was they listed the top 10 things that happened within the company and who they attributed them to. And so every month, every single day, somebody would walk in and they would see that person's name and what a great job they did that last month. It's inspiring, and it recognizes that they're paying attention to their employees. And that's huge, and will definitely make employees feel like they should stay with this company because they actually do care about me. The fifth is asking employees what they want and put feedback into action. So this is actually getting feedback from what's going on with your employees. What do they like? What don't they like? What can we do to improve things? What are the things that you don't like? What are the things that we could do to make it better? And I'll talk a lot about this because I think this is a huge area, because you really need to understand, again, your specific employees. It's really easy to say, well, let's just copy what Google did and let's just have all these wonderful things. But that might not make sense for the people that you're working with. If you have a workforce that's, you know, 65-year-old men, they're not going to want a Weight Watchers campaign. So you need to think about what the things are that they actually would want. Obviously, increasing training and learning opportunities. This is a big thing, again, talking about the Generation X and Generation Y. Generation X and Generation Y love to increase training and learning opportunities. That's a big, big thing to them. They feel like it's a career enhancement, and it's going to move them up the ladder and also give them more opportunities if, for whatever reason, it doesn't work out within the current employment opportunity they have. Hiring additional workers to ease workloads. This makes sense for the time, because what's happened is so many employers have had to have cutbacks that the companies are running at such a lean pace that now people are wearing multiple hats and their work-life balance is being thrown off. So people are no longer just working a 9 to 5, they're working 8 to 6, tons of overtime, possibly working on the weekends, having to check emails when they go home, and everyone's a little bit sick of it. They're ready to have a little bit nicer work-life balance. Academic reimbursement, this again comes back to the training. Essentially, it's a continued education. People want to feel like you're investing in them. And for a lot of people, that's part of this idea of that's additional compensation. So if you're providing training or you're providing academic reimbursement and that type of thing, that they look at that's additional compensation to them. So that's a really great thing to do. Carve out specific career paths and promote more. So this one I love because, again, I think this one you can do, again, with very little cost. This essentially is having a well-drawn-out org chart. If you have a well-drawn-out org chart and have a specific career path for people and talk to them about it and have a plan for them and think about how you're going to grow them up in the company, they really, really respond to that. Again, it's showing that you as an employer are giving back to them and you're taking the time to think about what they specifically need within the company. And this one, instituting a more casual dress code, I want to just point out because, again, this is free. And, again, is a huge, huge thing with the Generation X and Generation Y specifically, because most of these people don't want to dress up. They don't want to be stuffy and old like their parents. They want to look like college kids for the rest of their lives. So it's something to think about, and especially here in Southern California, that's a huge, huge, huge one that you can possibly enable and probably okay in terms of the business world because it is fairly casual in Southern California. So now I've told you all the top different areas and different ideas, and so how do I actually develop a retention and attraction strategy that's specific to my company? Because that's what you really would like to know. So the first thing is you have to collect data. I can't tell you right now that there is a one-size-fits-all to anybody. It's really, really so dependent on many, many different things within your company. First thing is your competition. You have to understand your competition, what's going on with them, what are they doing, what are they offering. You also need to know your employees' unique needs, and that comes back to the culture of your company, because your employees' unique needs are what's actually happening geographically with them, depending on the age range that they are, depending on the culture that they are. They came to your company for a reason, and they're staying there for a reason. So understanding what that is, you want to be able to continue, because that is part of who you are as a company. And then also understanding your changing workforce so that your strategy can adapt, because that, I think, is the biggest thing. You don't want to spend time building a strategy and implement a strategy, and then in 6 months it's outdated because the workforce changed and you weren't ready for it. So we'll dive into each one of these. Knowing your competition first. So do you know who your competitors are, first of all? Hopefully you do. Do you know what your competitors are offering? Let's talk about that. And do you know what sets you apart? So an example I like to use here is law firms. So law firms are very, very competitive in terms of recruiting and attracting and retaining. So I have a very good friend of mine who Harvard Law School graduated and decided, well, what really matters to me is not pay, it's work-life balance. I don't want these crazy high billable goals, because if I have these billable hourly goals, I'm not going to be able to spend time with my family and that type of thing. So when he was being recruited by all of the top law firms in the nation, number one question that he asked was, well, tell me your billable hours, tell me your billable hours. And the company that came in that said, well, we have the lowest billable hour rates, but the trade-off is that you're going to have lower pay. And he was completely happy with that. It made sense to him. He was ready for that. And that's what really set them apart. And accepting the fact that that is what made you kind of a specialty, now you know what kind of people you're attracting. And now you know what kind of people you want to attract, because that's a really, really big deal. But because they knew that they offer a lower billable rate, they knew they could offer less salary, which means they knew what their competitors were offering, because they knew that their competitors were saying almost a double billable hour rate, but the salary was only maybe 20% more. So they knew that this was a fair deal to somebody coming in. They could still attract good talent, and that they could still do that, but they would just do it in a different way. Instead of paying salary, they would lower the rates, the hourly rates, which is what they wanted to do for their culture. And obviously, they knew who their competitors were, because in the law industry, you kind of know who the big players are. So that's just an example of kind of knowing what your competition is doing, knowing what they're offering, and then knowing, do you want to play in that game, or do you want to separate yourself out? Trying to compete with somebody like Google is going to be a challenge, because Google has spent millions of dollars to build the most beautiful attraction retention strategy that we've seen. In fact, they Twitter and Google and blog about it all day long, and everybody writes articles about it. It's going to be a little bit tough if you try to go right up against them and say, well, we do everything just like Google. Instead, what you should try to do is just say, well, we're not Google. We're Yahoo, and what we do is flexible work schedules. And that's totally different than something that Google does, and that's how we're going to set ourselves apart, and that's how we're going to get different talent and better talent than what Google actually wants. And it's part of defining your culture throughout that too. So that's understanding your competition. The next piece is knowing your employees' unique needs. So what you want to understand here is what is actually currently working. So you need to understand what is currently attracting and retaining your key talent. So what I like to talk about, everybody talks about exit interviews, and let's do an exit interview, but as you all know, exit interviews give you very little information. Most people are fairly nice if they're giving you one, and they'll say something along the lines, oh, I love working here, but, I want to go in a different direction, which doesn't really give you anything. What I really like to emphasize is something I call a stay interview, and a stay interview is something that you have with your employees that you ask the questions of something along the lines like, what if there was one thing that I could do to make that changed here at the company that would make you leave, what would it be? And you might get something along the lines of, well, if you took Casual Friday out, I'd be really, really upset. And you'd be surprised that that's something that you don't even think about, that that's not really expensive. It's not something that you even consider as a big benefit, but that they value so highly that if you got rid of it, they'd be really upset. Even something along the lines of, if you have fruit every morning, and I really like that. Or maybe you ask the question of, what could we do now that would make you stay versus leaving? And maybe it would be, well, if we could have a walking group on Tuesdays, I would definitely stay. I would love that. I would be really happy if we built in a wellness program. And now you know, okay, we need to start thinking about a wellness program that's going to actually help people stay here and want to be here. So that's the idea of a stay interview, and picking your top talent to go through that. Not necessarily going through everybody, but the top talent. The satisfaction surveys are what everybody's talked about. These are the employee satisfaction engagement surveys, so kind of getting an idea of what they are happy with and that type of thing. And these are the topics that you want to talk about. Obviously, job satisfaction, training programs, how did the onboarding experience go? Did you like the recruiting, the training, the orientation, that type of thing? Obviously asking about benefits. Are you happy with your health insurance? Are you happy with your vacation time? Could we improve, et cetera, et cetera? If we offered a voluntary plan, would you like that? And then the work-life balance is, again, a big thing here because you want to make sure that people are being able to go home and actually spend time with their family. So understanding your changing workforce, we're going to go through this and talk about each 3 generations that are actually in the workforce right now. So we obviously have baby boomers, we have Gen X, and we have Gen Y. So diving into the baby boomers, this group believes that workers should earn their stripes. So this is a different mentality than the newer Gen X and Gen Y people. Baby boomers are dedicated, they're loyal, they're willing to stay in a job for a long time, which makes sense because they really believe that you don't just come in and get promoted to CEO. You work your life to become CEO, and you'll stay with one company for 30 years, and if you stay there, they'll give back to you. They give back to you by promotions and feeling like a family. Salary is not the biggest thing to this group. It's not. The biggest thing to them is feeling loyal and feeling connected to their employer. So they really value things like holiday party, work events, sense of family, because they've been there for a long time and they want to be there for a long time and they want to feel a sense of community with their coworkers. In addition, this group is different because their learning style has not adapted to the technology systems that we have now. So they're much more open to lectures, workshops, small group discussions, meaning that they'd be better to send to a conference or bring in a trainer to meet with them versus setting them an online enrollment system to go through training. Their expectations are heavy on the benefits, 401k matching, and job stability. So this group, if there is the potential of losing their job, they really, really are not comfortable because they feel so connected and really tied to their employer. So that's a really, really big deal to these people, and we've seen it a lot with the recession and layoffs and that type of thing, that these people will stick it out and they will stay there and they will do a really, really good job. So Generation X is currently 60% of the workforce, which is a big, big number. This group has the attitude of do it yourself, meaning that they'd rather just do it themselves, and they embrace change. So when I say embrace change, that is a lot of different things. That means that they've had to embrace change because of the technology changes. Which means that they're comfortable with that. They're comfortable with changing things, with changing systems, but they're also comfortable with changing jobs, meaning that they're not planning to stay at a company for 40 years. They want to be there for 3 to 5 years. If they go 3 to 5 years, they're happy. I mean, that's a pretty good run for most of these people, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. For an employer standpoint, you might think, well, hey, we're investing all this time and money into them. I want them to stay here. Well, for those first 3 to 5 years, you're going to get a really, really great worker, and that might be okay. And it might be time for them to move on because they're going to focus more on their growth potential and opportunity, and they may be done at that company. So it's just thinking about that this is how they work. They actually don't mind changing, and in fact, if there's a better opportunity, they'll probably move. So a couple things to think about this group is that work-life balance is the biggest thing to them. They really want that flexibility, that free time, that freedom, and that because they're building families and that type of thing, so they want vacation time, family benefits, and that sort of thing. They're also open for learning, e-learning, experimental learning, role play, and they're very tech savvy. Not as tech savvy as the Generation Y, but they've adapted to be pretty darn tech savvy for how long they've been in the industry. So Generation Y, the last group, these are the technological whiz kids. They have a little bit of an attitude, which is what's in it for me, and that's all they want to understand. So a big thing to them is salary, bonuses, up-to-date technology, more casual office environment. So what's in it for me, meaning I can't wait to do this job as long as you pay me really well. I'll work overtime as long as you give me a bonus, that type of thing. They're not just dedicated to their employer for no good reason. In fact, they have more so than anything a skepticism about employers and the government and that type of thing than any other generation. They're big on up-to-date technology, so they want the newest BlackBerry, the newest iPhone, the new iPad, the new computers, and they really value a more casual office environment. Some industries, that's never going to be okay, but if the event that you can, they really enjoy that. And as I said, they have instant gratification, which is that idea of salaries, bonuses, sign-on bonuses, give me something now, and then I'll work for you. So it's a little bit different than the other generations, which are, it's a little bit more of a fair share relationship. And obviously these are the learning style, very tech savvy and hands-on learners. They like to do it a little bit on their own and by themselves through technology, obviously. So some of the future trends we'll talk about. So what are we seeing in 2013 and beyond? Health benefits, not the only recruiting tool. We've seen this shift because of the costs. So we've seen that what people and employers are having to do is, because of healthcare reform and it becoming so expensive, that people are shifting, employers are shifting to different types of benefits, including voluntary. They're talking about pet insurance, car insurance, those different things that are allowing people to enroll on their own and pay for it themselves, but the employer is making it available and making it easy. And the other thing is talking a lot about wellness, and that employees are really looking for their employers to help make their lives easier. So wellness is a big piece of that and ties into this next bullet, which is enhanced benefit packages. Because at the end of the day, employees spend so much time with their employers. They really are looking to them to say, I need you to help make my life easier. I'm here all the time. I commute an hour both ways. I don't have time with my kids. So wherever you can help me out, if you can have a gym, you can provide daycare, you can make flex schedules, you can provide a wellness program, you can do Weight Watchers or whatever it is, then I'm going to feel like you're taking care of me in one way or the other. And obviously with these next two bullet points, shifting from Generation X to Generation Y, that the priorities in the employees are shifting towards short-term gains. When I say that, I mean that they're looking more towards bonuses and something right now. What's going to happen right now? What are you going to give me? Versus, oh, well, in 5 years you're going to invest into a 401k plan. That's not important to these people. They want something now. And it makes sense because they're so comfortable with moving around and changing jobs. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're developing your strategies. So Matt's going to proctor some questions now.
All right, well, thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm sure you guys have a lot to think about and evaluate and hold up against your current attraction retention program. So we have a few questions that were sent in. Again, as I said before, if we don't get to your question, then we will be sure to contact you individually, and would also encourage you all to stay up to date on the future webinars that we are doing. We're going to be every other month covering topics on communication, leadership development, a bunch of different stuff, and they're all free. You can go to hrwebinar.net at any time and see what's coming up. So here we go. First question. Should we use social media to recruit new talent?
Great question. And yes, absolutely. Social media is the new way to recruit new talent, and I would suggest that it's the #1 way. But again, it depends on your industry and that type of thing, because if you're hiring, a farming group, they're not going to have necessarily access to computers at the same level you would if you're hiring, I don't know, account management or a banking type of group. So you have to be careful with your industry, but LinkedIn is huge. It can cost a little bit of money to post a job on there, but I still think that it's probably #1 for young professionals. Facebook's a big one, obviously, and Twitter is really big too. So I think absolutely social media, the more the merrier, if it makes sense, obviously, for your culture and industry.
All right, good deal. The next one, we have no money. So how do we take some of your ideas and develop this with no budget?
So a couple things. Good point, because most people don't have any money for something like this. So we talk a lot about this, is I think just taking the time to specifically look at what is working with your employees, has not worked in the past and does work now, and just taking that time to look at that and be strategic is probably the key. But there's other avenues as well, which is, you can use social media, as we just talked about. Another thing is just attending job fairs and recruiting that way. It's a little bit old school, but I think you can get some really, really great talent that way. So there's definitely options out there.
Okay, we're going to take two more. We want to set up a peer mentor program. How do we encourage participation if we can't provide cash incentives? Another no budget question.
Great, another great question. I think the big thing here is to just understand, again, what would work for your employees. And I know I always come back to that, but I think it really is the most important piece, because you need to be able to have a specific incentive that works for your employees. And we talk about anything where you're developing an incentive program, you need to just make sure that it's tied into your employees, which may mean flex time off. It may mean a day off. It doesn't have to necessarily cost specific money. It could be that you allow them to take someone to lunch or something along those lines. So I think that there's just different ways to think about it, but I think the key is probably just asking them what non-monetary benefits would incentivize them.
All right, and our last question here. You talked about comparing yourself to your competition. What are some ideas on how I can find that information?
Well, I mean, you can search the internet, obviously, but that's probably not what you're asking. I think the big thing is looking at competitive job posts. So, LinkedIn has a lot of job posts, Craigslist has job posts, and even if it's not your direct competition, maybe in your area, you can look at just in your industry, and even, looking at what other job posts in other places near you are doing, because some people are looking for jobs just purely geographically based. So, if you have an office in downtown LA, you may look at, like, what are our next door neighbors offering, because someone may be looking literally next door so they don't have to move, that type of thing. So I think, in addition to your competition, looking at that, but looking at geographic specifics would be helpful too.
All right, well, thanks so much, Jennifer. Some good stuff. Again, like I said, if we didn't get to your question, we will be sure to contact you personally and give you a full detailed answer. We're going to give you a little perk and give you 15 minutes back of the hour that you signed up with us for. Be sure to check out hrwebinar.net for our upcoming webinars. And if you have any questions,